Alright, Chapter 2.2 of Math 113. We're going to talk about functions, trig functions of non-acute angles. Non-acute angles, that means that we're not going to talk about any angles, really, that are in quadrant 1. Quadrant 1 goes from 0 to 89. Really, if you think about that, because 90 is a right angle, so we're going to talk about non-acute angles. So we're going to look at everything that's past that. And the first way to do that is we're going to have to talk about reference angles. And these are associated with every non-quadrantal angle in standard position. And is the positive acute angles is the reference angles. So we are going to try to find the positive acute angles as a reference angles so that we can find this, because we're going to be looking for exact values. Those are things that we're going to be looking for. There's not a quadrant 1 example, just like I said, because those are all acute angles. So we're looking at quadrant 2. So here it is in standard position, and it opens up to here. And we're going to look at the terminal side is where the angle ends, and then we're going to look at what's called theta prime. Has the little tick mark. Has the little tick mark. And that's going to be our reference angle. And we always work with the x-axis. Here's your little notes down here. It says the reference angle is always found with reference to the x-axis. We will never use the y-axis when we're dealing with this. So we have this great big angle that opens up. And then we're going to try to find what it is from here. The theta prime. And this is in quadrant 2. So, okay, from here, what you say is when you're looking here in quadrant 1, it's going to be 180 minus theta. In quadrant 2, it's going to be theta minus 180. And in quadrant 3, you're going to wind up 360 minus theta. So let's look at what we have down at the bottom with some examples. And we're going to talk about these. So we have 218. 218 is in quadrant 3. And in quadrant 3, we're going to say theta minus 180. So we're going to say 218 minus 180. And it's going to equal 38 degrees. This is our reference angle. Now let's look at B. B is 1,387 degrees. It's a big angle. And with big angles, you need to make sure that you find the coterminal angle first. So we're going to look at the coterminal. So remember, how do you find that? That's 387 minus 3 times 360. Let's see if I can write that a little neater. So 3 times 360 is going to be 1080. So we have 1,387 minus 1080 equals 307 degrees. So that's our coterminal angle. So now we just take the coterminal angle and we subtract it from 360 degrees. Whoops, I wrote that twice. So 360 minus 307 is going to give us 53 degrees. So the reference angle is 53 degrees. So this is when we're looking for the things that are non-acute angles, and we're not looking for exact values. So we have to be careful when we're looking for exact values. So the next thing says to find the trig values, and it's all of them, of functions of 210 degrees. Well, the first thing I need to do is think about where 210 degrees is. And I think we know that it is somewhere in quadrant 3. And then I'm also going to remember a Smart Trig class. So the only things that are positive would be in 210. In quadrant 3 would be tangent and cotangent. So I need to remember that. Now, if we can find our reference angle, let's find a reference angle and see if we can get it, because we're going to look for exact values on this one. So our reference angle is going to be 210 minus 180 degrees, and that's going to equal 30 degrees. Again, all the absolute values, we're not going to talk about signs of the functions yet, but all the absolute values of 30 degrees and 210 are identical. Okay? We just need to remember when we put it in quadrant 3 that only tangent and cotangent are positive. So let's think about it. If we have a triangle and we have 30, 60, and 90, you have the square root of 3, you have 2, and you have 1. And again, we're talking about 30. And you've got your little sheet that you can use, but we're going to talk about 30. So sine of 210 degrees is going to be opposite over hypotenuse. Cosine of 210 degrees, remember 210 degrees is the same as 30, is going to be the square root of 3 over 2. And tangent of 210 degrees is going to be 1 over the square root of 3, but remember we don't leave it there, so it's the square root of 3 over 3. And then our reciprocal functions, cosecant of 210 equals 2. Again, we're just dealing with absolute values at the moment. Secant of 210 is 2 square roots of 3, so we don't leave it that. So it winds up being 2 square roots of 3 over 3. And then cotangent of 210 is going to simply be just the square root of 3. And again, all of these are the positive values, absolute values. So think about it. Which ones are the only ones that are positive? Tangent and cotangent. So sine, cosine, cosecant, and secant are all negative. So those are things that we need to remember. Tangent and cotangent are positive. You will be graded on that and graded accordingly. You have to get your signs correct. Okay, we're going to talk about finding trig functions of any non-quadrantal angle. So we're going to look at any of them. The first thing you do is you find the coterminal angle. We talked about that. Second, you find the reference angle, theta prime, and then you find the trig value functions of reference angles. And then you have to do, the last thing is you have to determine if the steps, or you have to determine once we find those values, if they are positive or negative. We want to make sure we get our signs correct. So our first example, they actually gave us a diagram, and we are only looking, we're not looking for all 6. It just says to find the exact value of each expression. So right now we're just looking for cosine of negative 240. So remember, negative goes clockwise, so it goes here. So when you have 360 minus 240, that gives you 120. So that is our coterminal angle. So if we went in the opposite direction, if we went this way, this would be 120 degrees. So the difference from 180 to 120, remember when it's in quadrant 2, we say 180 minus theta. In this case, it's going to be 60 degrees. We're going to use our 60 degree, our 30, 60, 90 special right triangle. And we're just going to draw it right here so that we can kind of keep an idea of what it is. Okay, so you have the square root of 3 You have 2 and 1. So cosine of 60 degrees, cosine of 60 degrees is what we're looking for. So cosine is is adjacent over hypotenuse. So cosine of negative 240 is the same thing as saying cosine of 60, and it's going to be 1/2. It's adjacent over hypotenuse. And now remember, it landed in quadrant 2. So, A, smart trig class. Is their sign supposed to be positive or negative? It's supposed to be negative. So we're finished with that one. B says to find tangent of 675. So B says to find tangent of 675. So the first thing I need to do is to find a coterminal and then a reference angle. So I'm going to say 675 minus 360. So 675 minus 360 gives me 315. So that is our reference angle. I'm sorry, that's our coterminal angle. So then you would say 360, because that winds up in what? Quadrant 3. So that is 360 minus theta. So minus 315, and that's going to equal 45 degrees. So here's our 45-degree triangle, 1, 1, square root of 2. So tangent of 675 degrees equals 1 over 1, which is simply just 1. And again, it's in quadrant 4 this time, A, smart trig class. So tangent is negative in quadrant 4, so our answer is negative. Okay, let's look at our next example. It says to evaluate cosine 120 plus 2 sine squared of 60 minus tangent squared 30. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to substitute cosine 120 and make it cosine 60. And if you can't remember how to do that, that's its reference angle. And then I'm going to think about my triangle, and cosine of let's see, we got to look where 120 is. It's here. Okay. So cosine of 120 is going to be negative 1/2 plus 2 times, and then sine of 60 is the square root of 3 over 2, and then this is going to be squared, minus, and then tangent of 30 is the square root of 3 over 3, and it's squared. So now we need to evaluate and put things together. So we get negative 1/2 plus 2 times, we're going to clean this up. That gives me 2 times 3 over 4 minus 3 over 9. So now we get negative 1/2 plus 6 over 4 minus 3 over 9. And if you punch all that into your calculator, you're going to wind up with 2/3, or you can do it all by hand and get in like denominators. But the final answer is 2/3. Now, this one is wanting us to evaluate each expression by first expressing the function in terms of an angle between 0 and 360. That's great. That means that it wants us to go in and find it between 0 and 360, so we're looking for really just one rotation, or we're looking for coterminal angles is the way I think about it. If it's greater than 360, we're looking for coterminal angles. So the first thing I'm going to do is say 780 minus 2 times 360 equals 60 degrees. So cosine of 780 is the same thing as saying cosine of 60 degrees. And so we're going to find where it is. Cosine of 60 degrees is going to wind up here in quadrant 1. So cosine of 160, don't forget your triangles, the answer is 1/2. So our answer is cosine 780 degrees equals 1/2. And remember, everything in quadrant 1 is positive. So cosine is going to stay positive. Negative 405 plus 360 equals negative 45. That's our coterminal angle. So we didn't get quite far enough. So we need to do it again. So negative 45 plus 360 gives us 315. That's our coterminal. We need to find a reference. So remember, 315 is in quadrant 4. So you're going to say 360 minus 315 equals a positive 45, and that's what we wanted to get. So tangent of negative 405 is the same as saying tangent of 45, so A smart trig class. So tangent's going to be negative here in the 45 degree triangle is 1/1. So the final answer is just -1. Okay, the directions for the next one says to find all the values of theta if theta is in the interval 0 to 360 and cosine is square root of 2/2. So you have to stop and think a little bit. It says to find all the values. Well, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to think about my diagram, A smart trig class. And where is cosine negative? Very good. Quadrant 2 and quadrant 3 are the only places that it is negative. So that tells me we are looking in 2 quadrants. And we only had to do 1 rotation, so that's why we don't have to worry about it if it went 5 rotations or 6 rotations. It just said between 0 and 360. So we're only looking at those angles. Now, let's think about what reference angle has square root of 2/2. It is a 45 degree angle, right? Think about it. It's the only one that has the square root of 2 when you're dealing with exact values. So, if we have our quadrants here, we're going to say 180 minus theta, and then we're going to say 180 plus theta. And we said it was our reference angle. So, our first one is going to be 135. And our second one is going to be 225. So our answer is, all of our values are 135 and 225. For anything that has cosine, negative square roots of 2/2. This ends our chapter 2.2 of Math 113.